Jets Get Born turned 20 this month. Again, we're recording this last week of September. Jet, Australian quartet comprising brothers Nick and Chris Sester. And I actually learned here a couple of years ago that it's an Italian surname, so it may actually be supposed to be pronounced Chester, but the Anglicanized version of that is Sester, and that's how they're always introduced in interviews. Cameron Muncie, Mark Wilson, and I actually wasn't aware of the record when it was first released because I was just moving on from the oldies. I was raised on and listened to a lot of classic rock. After my wife and I started dating a couple of years later, after the record's release, she introduced me to two of the singles off of the Get Born record, Look What You've Done and Are You Gonna Be My Girl, which is easily their most well-known tune, Are You Gonna Be My Girl. It's been on movies, commercials, you name it. I'd forgotten this until I was doing a little bit of research for this episode, but it was actually on, if it wasn't the first iPod commercial, it was one of the early iPod commercials. So, huge song. As with any group that has a smash hit, particularly a debut, Jet has attracted their fair share of detractors. Are You Gonna Be My Girl in particular has gotten a lot of hate. People say it's simple, it's derivative, it's vapid, even misogynistic. And to that I say, can we not just enjoy rock and roll anymore? And that's what this song is. It's just straight up rock and roll. It's pure, unadulterated rock and roll. You got a four-piece band, drums, bass, two guitars, a couple of additional guitar overdubs, but essentially four-piece band. It's loud, it's up-tempo, in your face. A guy screaming at the top of his lungs about a girl he fancies.
So 1, 2, 3, take my hand and come with me because you look so fine that I really want to make you mine.
That is rock and roll in a nutshell. And with a little bit of different production, Elvis could have easily done this. He would have done it an octave or two lower, but Elvis could have easily done this in the 50s. The Beatles could have done it early in their career in the 60s. It could have been made as kind of an homage to rock and roll in the 70s. It's just a timeless song. Could have really been released in any era with a little production tweak. And at the time it was released, it was a breath of fresh air. Another great throwback rock track from Get Born is the opener, Last Chance. It's sung by Chris Sester, who is the younger brother. He's also the drummer. Nick sings most of the lead, but Chris can channel this Mick Jagger vibe in his vocals, and he does that on this track. And the overall feel of the song is a sassy, swaggering Stones feel with a little bit of AC/DC thrown in.
You ain't nothing to me if you got nothing to say.
I could really see Mick doing this up on stage with his arms, doing the rooster.
Hey, why don't you go out and do the rooster? I'm not sick.
Another great track, I mentioned the single, Look What You've Done. It was the other big single off of the record. It sounds just like a late 60s Beatle track.
Take my photo off the wall if it just won't sing for you.
The piano in particular. Chris plays some drum runs that are straight out of the Ringo playbook.
You've made a fool of everyone.
And that's another criticism the band receives, that they're just ripping off the Beatles. And first, I say to that, if you're going to rip somebody off, you might as well rip off the best. And the Beatles were the best. And second, as a fan of that type of music, as a Beatles fan, I love that style of music and I want to hear more. And since the Beatles aren't here anymore, the only way I'm going to hear that type of music is if new artists, if other artists make songs that sound like that. So I absolutely love this track. And the 2000s also had a lot of piano pop rock that was clearly inspired by the Beatles, whether the audience or even the artists themselves realized it. So this was the perfect time for this song to come out. Another great Beatles-esque tune from the record is Radio Song. Chris takes the lead on that as well. Move On. Not only my favorite song from the record, but one of my favorite songs of all time. It's an acoustic folk ballad reminiscent of Dylan with some great harmonies. And they're really big Dylan fans. In fact, the title, Get Born, actually comes from Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues. There's a line in there, get born, get well, hang around the inkwell. That's where they got this title from. Great harmonies on this song. And it's also sung by Chris. I didn't realize how many of my favorite songs are actually sung by Chris when he takes the lead, the lesser of the two brothers. But there's a bridge that, again, vocally very Mick Jaggery, but more like you can't always get what you want, and there's kind of a can't always get what you want vibe to the overall song. Really great track. Come Around Again is another mellower pop rock ballad.
When I wake up, please come around again.
And I think this one leans more into the actual 2000s era. Still a really good track, though, which I like the 2000s pop rock era myself. Maybe just a little too modern for some audiences, though, if you're listening to them for the older school feel. Lazy Gun. This one is just weird, but in the best possible way. It's also Beatles-esque in that way, like some of the more experimental Beatles stuff. It's groovy, it's sassy with this odd chord progression and guitar tone. And then it just totally switches gears into an anthemic ballad.
Change nothing, future's in.
Then it switches back. It's almost like they wrote and recorded two songs, then cut them up and spliced them in editing. And there are many more songs on the record that are great. For me, there are one or two skippers in the bunch, and the regular edition of the record has 14 tracks. So if you've got 14 tracks and you're only skipping one or two songs, that's a fantastic record. If you like early rock and roll and early classic rock and you haven't heard this record, go check it out. It was wonderful to hear it break through the noise of the 2000s when it was originally released, and it's a delightful reprieve to re-listen to today. If you enjoyed that clip, be sure to check out the full episode on the Words Like That YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts.
Can't handle words like that.